Hey, there's the man.
Hey, sorry about that, guys. Firefighting today.
That's okay. It looks to me like we're going to have light turnout today. I just posted some reminders. Oh, we've got a few more people hopping on. Hey, Manuel.
Hey, hello, Steve. Hi, Rock.
Yeah, man.
I think we should go through your spreadsheet, have some discussion, even if there's only a few of us here. We've got it recorded, and that way we can still post that and get people caught up.
Yeah, I've got actually some slides. I'll walk through that. That actually explains the spreadsheet. So
Perfect. Let's go then.
can y'all see that?
Yeah, looks great.
All right. So print two, like just the some of the highlights, right? I think the community gave us a clear signal that what's at the top of the list is prompt injection, right? So I think that settles the debate of whether or not we should continue to treat it as a top 10 vulnerability. So we'll just kind of go and get started here. All right. So this is kind of what we asked the community to do, right? Fill out the form. The scoring rubric was intentionally kind of boring, if you will, right? I wanted to kind of keep it simple. We kind of have three axes, I guess, with a 5-point scale, right? With the 20 candidates. I think do I have it right on here? Yeah. So the three axes were clarity, importance, and distinctiveness, right? So importance asks, whether the risk actually matters. Like, should it be on the list? Clarity asks whether the category was defined well enough for us to actually act on. Distinctness asks whether the candidate is its own thing. This was only relevant to the new candidate entries, right? Whether it was standalone or if it was some sort of flavor of one of the existing top 10. So any questions there?
No?
Nope.
All right, so we have 52 ballots, right? Which, I mean, the data scientist in me would have loved 1,000, but 52 is good. And as Steve reminded me yesterday, probably still statistically significant. So we're good. So I think, especially given the responses from the original poll that Steve went out, I think this was actually really good turnout and feedback. So let's walk through kind of the milestones, right? Some respondents scored every candidate, but other respondents touched only the new proposals and skipped the incumbents, and then also vice versa. Right. So we don't have like a clear distribution across all of them. Some respondents only commented on like 3 and ignored all the other ones. Right. So that means like I don't, I don't know if we're going to publish these numbers like publicly, but they're, the scaling that I kind of ranked on the upcoming slides is, just kind of straight mean without any really like smoothing of the empty values. If that makes sense.
Yeah, just in terms of publishing these, I mean, these are obviously not the final rankings, but I'd be comfortable, either you or I could do it, but putting up a blog that just grabs some of those highlights of how we did the ranking and what the raw stuff looks like at this point. You publish the spreadsheet on the channel, so it's all out there anyway, but doing something that gets more widely read and keeps the community engaged in the process, I think that'd be fine.
So I kind of broke down, if you guys looked at the spreadsheet, I broke it down into 2 cases. The first case kind of protects the incumbents, right? And so it added a distinctiveness of like a score of 5, of 1 to 5 to the existing LLMs. So obviously kind of skewed the numbers towards them. The second case stripped out kind of that protection, kind of smoothed it out, and using the raw community distinctiveness for every candidate, right? So essentially I gave the incumbents the average of the rest of the distinctiveness to better try and compare apples to apples. On a scale of 1 to 5, I discounted anything less than a score of 3 distinctiveness in the new candidate entries and did the suggested roll up, like use those for the suggested roll up. Like, do we roll them up into one of the other incumbent entries, right? So this was case 1. Right, so this was just the straight assuming that the existing entries are distinctive on their own, 5 out of 5, right? It skewed it. Interestingly, right, as expected, all of the entries remain, but they get reordered if we go just based on the community input. One item to call out is that there's a proposal to change LLM 07 from system prompt leakage to hidden content exposure. And personally, I think based on the GitHub entry makes sense based on the additional information and clarification. But we'll let the core team vote on it.
I'll just put out a quick thought here. This one was the system prompt leakage was quite controversial the last time we did the list. It was kind of a late submission, came from out of the blue to some extent from somebody who hadn't been heavily involved in the project. But I think a lot of people looked at it and it grew a lot of support, I think primarily because when people with real red team experience looked at it, it's like the single thing everybody starts with is you try to get some sense of the LLM to basically expose its own structure by getting what's in the system prompt. And I think so many first agents are built basically as a system prompt, and that's it. And people put everything from weak guardrails in there, like the system prompt says, don't ever, 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 ever do this. Like that's going to work. And the fact that you put don't ever, ever, ever do this in there means like somebody gets it to say, oh, I don't ever, ever, ever want to do this. You're like, okay, that's what they're trying to not get you to do. My job is now to get you to do it. And worse yet, and people got mad about this because they thought it sounded stupid, but it's a fact, is people will put everything from API keys and secrets and, their GitHub keys and God knows what else in their system prompt. And people will scream, well, don't do that. And it's like, yeah, but how are we going to tell them to do that if we don't put it on the list somewhere? So I'm not attached to this as a standalone entry, but I feel like it would do a lot of good to have those concepts covered somewhere, because that is
So Steve, this is something that we talk about at my work all the time, and I'm totally with you. Like most of our AI pen testing cases, we determine that system prompt disclosure is not like a vulnerability, like not a reportable event by itself, right? It depends on what's in that system prompt.
yes.
So in my mind, it belongs under sensitive information disclosure, where sensitive information disclosure kind of says, hey, one of the places you shouldn't put sensitive information because it could be disclosed is your system prompt, right?
I like that.
And that is the way we have treated it internally. So when we do a lot of pen testing of AI systems, we do use the OWASP top 10 as part of the way that we tell people prioritization. And what we have done is the system prompt leakage actually under sensitive information disclosure as an informational finding, not like one that has any priority attached to it. So that's, for what it's worth, practically, that's what my organization's been doing.
Yeah, I like that because it's not so much, it's not that you can patch it to keep it from disclosing its internal structure, its internal system prompt. You could try, but that alone is not the vulnerability. The vulnerability is that you put stuff in there, something you could find.
Yeah, and there's so many cases that we've done where we look at we take the system prompt, we go to the system owner, and I'm like, do you care that someone could see this? And they're like, no, it's actually, we on our website we say what system prompt we use, and that's actually there's a lot of people who do that, right? So I think the community has increasingly been like, you shouldn't treat this field like it's something that is secret. Like you should assume that your system prompt will be exposed and treat it, govern it accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, as long as we get that in there somewhere, I feel like we have to cover that, whether it's a standalone item or not. So I think, Rachel, your context helps. And I do certainly think it's related to item 2 there for sure.
Whoa, that'll guarantee we have a new entry on the list then, if we're rolling 2 of the existing entries up. That'd be interesting. All right, anything else on this before I move on? So the second way I ranked them, like I mentioned, was I kind of normalized the distinctiveness score across the existing top 10, which then definitely gave us some more interesting results. LLM 07 fell off the list fell off the top 10 completely, which now if we're talking about rolling it into 02, but then these are the additional ones that bubbled up. Again, you can see some reordering of the existing top 10, but these are the ones that bubbled up, right? Persistent memory poisoning and MCP tool interface exploitation. And I don't have the exact language of each in front of me right now, but yeah. Any questions there?
For me, I helped Ken write LLM 02, and we try to stay away of LLM 07. But I thought of that, and I'm with you all, and especially the context that Rachel just gave us. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think if we make a decision about whether it's standalone or merged, then if it is merged, you can take off that restrictor to not duplicate it. If it stays standalone, then you made the right decision. So I think you have done the right thing to this point, and if we decide that we're merging it, then you could take a second look. Just a couple quick comments on these, just first blush. I spent some time thinking about memory poisoning. Not surprisingly, it's sitting right next to another thing that says poisoning. And, we've got data poisoning, and then we've got memory poisoning. My gut reaction is I think I like having them separate. If for no other reason than right now, nobody's really prepared to think about memory. A lot of people have not even built an agent yet that has any kind of persistent memory. And I think the other piece is I think it's a much easier thing to poison. Data and model poisoning become, how do you put it, development hygiene issues, right? It's like, okay, did I get a model from a good place? Am I taking care of my training data and scrubbing it? And it's all, development time, development maturity, which is super important and worth reiterating to people. But this idea of memory, and just having lived with my OpenClaw for a while and watching the hoity-toity way that it just deals with chucking stuff in memory and you not knowing what it's remembering, and how do you think about auditing that? And then looking at what people are doing now, where they're building all sorts of crazy memory systems, from vector databases to wikis and all sorts of other things that are going to live with your agents. Getting something on there to cover that. In the abstract, I like that idea. The other one on 10, and this is just about the title, but I ask controversial questions a lot when I'm out talking to people. And one of the things I ask them is MCP dead? And everybody gets up in a lather and goes, oh, there's all these MCP servers. And I'm like, nah, it's already dead. I don't know whether it's going to be MCP grows up so much in the next year or two as to be unrecognizable from the current version, or if it gets subsumed by something else, but it's wonky. But for this entry, if you took the brand name off and you just said tool interface exploitation, I'd be way more comfortable with it. And we can certainly have examples of things that are happening with MCP servers because it is the primary interface, but I would love this to be more abstract, because I would be shocked if in the next 12 months a bunch of people aren't pushing heavily revised different standards for tool interface. And certainly people are building their own custom tool interfaces too. And I think having some mention of like, okay, if you're going to build your own tools, you still got to think about these things. So just a thought from me.
Yeah, and I think it could even be broad enough to roll up skills too, although not a specific tool interface per se. It's just reading an MD file. That's what everybody's saying is going to replace MCP.
Or I think maybe covering that somewhere, and maybe it's something like tool and skill exploitation or something. We could experiment with it and have the team that's working on experiment. But I do like the idea. I mean, it's not that MCP is some company's intellectual property, but it's the closest thing to a brand name that shows up here anywhere. And it kind of ties it to this very specific technology implementation that I don't think we need to tie it to that closely, at least not in the title. Certainly we can have real examples that call out MCP specifically, just like, in supply chain, I can have a thing that calls out Hugging Face, but I don't have to say Hugging Face and GitHub mismanagement as the title for the supply chain.
So here's kind of my 2 cents when I've started thinking about these things. So like one of the updates that I made to the prompt injection entry was to abstract the anatomy of prompt injection to attack surface, whether or not there's propagation behavior, and encoding so like Morse code, base 64, so on and so on. And I abstracted it to that level because that's helpful for understanding the type of layered controls that you want to look at. But when I think about MCP tool interface exploitation as it's written today, it feels like we are not describing a vulnerability so much as we are describing an attack surface which may have a vulnerability in it. And the very sort of like pedantic phrasing of a vulnerability as something a threat takes action on to realize a risk, I don't know that this quite fits in the right way. So I would be, on the board with the idea that this should be, more described in other places as like because prompt injection was updated to include you can have prompt injection come from this type of attack surface, right? To me, it makes more sense that the entries acknowledge whether or not this MCP tool attack surface is a method that could be used to realize that vulnerability, because not all vulnerabilities could be actually realized through that attack surface, but a lot of them are. So that's just, that's just sort of, I guess, my way of thinking about it. Like, and I sort of agree with you too, in that using the specific phrase MCP feels like it's going to date us very quickly, because there's so many other ways that this really could happen.
Get to move on, or more debate there?
I have another concern regarding persistent memory poisoning. The Minja scenario in vector similarity retrieval poisoning over a shared store, that that is LLM8's risk 3, which says that embedding geometry attacks, I think they should stay in LLM8, because that's literally our vector and embedding weaknesses. And we had this whole discussion with Rachel as well for LLM, because once something is in the vector store DB memory, so we have tried to show it how it becomes a persistent memory at that the wrong information stays in the memory for long in the vector DB. So we can, want to know your feedback on this. Like, should we,
So then it's a memory, as you just said.
Yes. However, our LLM8 is vector and embeddings weaknesses, so that is literally about vector D as well.
Well, let me throw the wrench out. Like Pinecone came out yesterday, day before yesterday, and effectively said, vectors are dead. That they're pivoting to. I didn't even dig into the depths of what their new database format is going to be. So, probably very premature to completely eliminate this from the list, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more piece of context on that just from the last list. This was like the system prompt injection or system prompt leakage. This was one of the late ads in the last round. The push really came from, again, people with a lot of experience doing this thing. We're not covering RAG anywhere explicitly. And remember this is the 2025 list, but we were writing it in 2024, and 2024 was the year of the RAGbot, kind of like 2026 is the year of the agent. And so I think we felt some pressure to get some coverage of RAG. This started with a title that said RAG, and I think maybe a little bit like my MCP comment, people are like, is that going to feel weird and dated, and isn't there a more general thing? And so it wound up, the team that built this called it this, and structured it there. And I think it came out well and it's been useful. But I think just stepping back, the intent here was to give some guidance specific to people building RAG systems, wherever you get your retrieval from. And it never had to be vectors and embeddings, but that was the predominant thing. I'm not sure that's even as true today as it was, and it's probably going to continue to get less true. But mentally, I would just encourage people, think about this as the placeholder for where we want to put sort of vulnerabilities to think about while you're doing raggy things, and at least look at it through that lens before we decide what to do with it. Because I think it is an artifact of its time, which is why some pieces of it may feel dated, but maybe that's a call to update it, because it's not like people are stopping doing RAG. It's a law of physics. So we just should think about what secure RAG looks like. And I think it is durable at this point. It's not like your OpenClaw agent doesn't do RAG. It does. Everything does.
So where exactly should we put that, in that persistent memory attack, or should that particular attack scenario should be covered in both, or in one of those?
To me sounds like persistent memory, and then you just point to LLM.
I don't think, again, just going back to the RAG thing, to me, persistent memory is like memory you're growing over time. When the kind of RAG things that I do, I'm like, go run some giant machine learning job off on the side and generate a bunch of data and RAG it into the LLM. So it doesn't feel to me, again, the artifact of the way that one was constructed may feel like it wants to bleed into the memory thing. So some parts of it might, but I would just encourage, think about it as as RAG, and memory is one tiny part of what you're going to shove into RAG context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it is one of the attacks that we have written. Yeah, that makes sense.
But to maybe add something there, I wouldn't make memory poisoning a whole distinct category, to be honest. I think I would just generalize the whole LM08 and just shove memory poisoning, WAG issues and stuff like that into that. So that, because in my opinion, the attack vector is the same. Of course, all of them are vulnerable to indirect bond injection, more or less, which I see in AI red team engagements or stuff like that. But all of them are working pretty similar. So if you're retrieving chunks from a memory as a string, or if you're receiving the chunks from a vectorized database, doesn't matter at the end of the day. They all of the both get outputted more or less the same.
Just a quick call out. I this is reminiscent of the memory threads we have in the Slack channel to me, which were about distinguishing sort of storage memory, ongoing, persistent through kind of in-memory memory and more one-time memory. So that there's just some additional thoughts in Slack that I know folks have hashed through already.
All right, so I think we could safely say more discussion.
So are these final rock? I mean,
Not even close. Like, so I will get into the next sprint here. All right, so how I alluded to this earlier, how I went through rolling up, like, or at least the candidates to was really the low distinctiveness, right? And there were 4 of the new candidate entries that looked like could potentially be a good roll, like cross-modal safety bypass into prompt injection, right? Because again, kind of like the same mechanism, just maybe an expanded input server, and the community voting in the comments in the voting for that entry kind of LLM artifact promotion trust failure into 003, kind of like the lifecycle vulnerability kind of in the same kind of supply chain, right? And this also scored the lowest distinctiveness score of any. Then compositional fine tuning into LLM04. I mean, fine tuning poisoning's data point kind of, and then system insecure code generation into improper output handling. I think the argument there, right, the insecure code is generated because of the output not being properly handled or scrubbed, whatever the case. Right, and we're not going to blindly do this, right? If we want to roll any of this up, the FG elites can take it or leave it. We'll go from there. Any questions?
No, I made a comment about the cross-modal safety bypass that there was already a little bit in the prompt injection piece, but I can take some of what was there and expand it. So that's my 2 cents.
Cool. All right, so kind of what's some of the qualitative comments telling us? I think there's one person in particular that just hammered on the anthropomorphism theme. Fine, I get it, right? Models aren't sentient, they don't scheme. Right? I mean, we talk about it as a group, and I'm sorry if one of you are on here, please speak up. We could talk about it as a group, kind of how pedantic we want to get with the language, right? Because language is important. I also don't want to completely spiral out of control. The reality is, I think a lot of this language is in the zeitgeist anyway, right? So we can acknowledge it or ignore it. That's up to Steve. Also talked about the MCP kind of framing, just right. So it goes beyond just MCP potential. So cross-category drift, inference time and sidechain pulled votes more towards misinformation. So one respondent called out, misinformation from a respondent towards unbounded consumption from another. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Honestly, I'm not interpreting my notes. So category drift and inference time side channel issues actually pulled votes towards both information and to unbounded, right? So kind of 2 different homes depending on like which any questions. I did some. I'm not taking this into consideration at all with the scoring, but interesting kind of how novices versus voted. New candidates tend to score things high on importance and low on distinctiveness. They were more likely to advocate for. So, an interesting. All right, so sprint 3. Now we start to refine, right? Now we start to refine the candidate entries, right? Like maybe like still continue to work on the language of the taxonomy. I think now we do have some evidence. We produced at least a ranking that we can start to triangulate with the community. I think where our framework, our internal framework and the ballot converge, we do have a defensible position. And I think where the diverge, we should like further take it into the working group conversation. Now, what I'm doing is for the first time in the history of the top 10, we have actual real incident data. And Emmanuel has been doing a good job at collecting and labeling. So Emmanuel's got a database that's got over 7,000 kind of incident entries in there and labeled against the top. So I'm actually building a model to where we could take our candidate entries and have it like semantically against Emmanuel's database and say, okay, we've ranked them 1 to 10, but based on how the buckets fall, right? Maybe it's not our 1 to 10. Maybe 3 is number 10 and 10 is number. If we go just based on that as a scoring, really what I want to have is a more data driven. Ultimately, the human judgment comes down, right? But I just want to make sure that we have all the data available since we now have this incident data available to further inform our decision. And I literally started working on the model yesterday, so don't ask me the who, what, when, where, why, and algorithms used yet. But depending on how long training goes, it'll be done in the next. So cool. Any questions?
No, it's I'm happy that what I've been doing using your guidance, Rock, it's been useful, and yeah, I hope that helps accomplish what we need. At the end of the day, we want the top 10 to be as updated as possible, relevant to the field, to help all of us do our job. So, and then what I'll try to do, I'll try to create some new labels, and I'll use the 5 highest score on the list that you showed for the rankings. I'll use the standing top 10 and the 5 new entries as per voting, and I'll try to map that incident database as well. So we have some kind of categorization there. Because I'm just curious about these new entries. We can map on the incidents that I was able to.
Yeah, I don't think you need. I actually don't think you need to do that because I'm using essentially the language within the entries to map
Okay.
to an LLM, right?
Okay.
So to map to an incident that then maps to the LLM top 10. So
Okay.
So I don't think you have. If my model worked, if it's a massive fail, then hey, it was a learning experience. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep me posted. I'm
Yep.
happy.
if I see gradient exploded one more time, I'm gonna explode. But that's a difference.
I exploded my tokens doing that.
Oh. I'm gonna ask for a grant from OWASP. All right, and this just kind of still goes down the human judgment track, right? Like, so I think we need to ratify the rule. We need to resolve what we're gonna do with LLM, right? Resolve the naming. Well, I guess now roll that up into whatever the case. I think some scope boundary decision. Why did I put this on here? Oh yeah, some of the comments. I think I skipped over the comments on the other slide. Whether or not weaponize LLM abuse and model scheming the language, but if that's even in scope for the or is that a companion doc? We drop it entire. I don't know if they'd end up as actual entries anyway. So maybe we just consider in some of the other like elevation override. This essentially goes to our best judgment, right? After we get all the data and all the things, do we feel that something is underrepresented because it's too new to really have data driving behind it, right? So I want to make sure that we keep that in mind in our conversation as we're honing.
And that's a good point, Rock, because when we did the last iteration for the top, John and myself, we wrote a similar entry regarding agents, and then we end up merging those 2 entries. And then it was decided, oh, it's too new for the top 10. Guess what? It became its own top 10.
Right, and then I think based on our conversations today, we can kind of skip this slide. Like, I think we just take this, especially seeing what the outcomes of trying the incidents of the top 10, like the new candidate entries. into the various buckets, right? Yeah. Any questions? All right. So my asks, over the next few weeks, right? Any of those candidate into the new entries that are in the spreadsheet or now LLM07 into O2, I would ask that and grab them, take a look, decide what to do with them. I'm gonna lean on your judgment. Remember that the candidate entries are also in GitHub, right? So you can get all the links. And any hidden candidates, anything that we haven't considered. I mean, this is a fast-moving space. So, I mean, something could have came up in the last, right? Like I said, Pinecone just said, so I'm not bought in on that. So no answers now, but just think.
So is our timeline from today 7 days,
Well,
or is how?
our timeline for 14 days was, I don't care if you sign up on the roll-ups, honestly, at 7. I just figured I'd help break it down. And then if we need to relaunch, we could relaunch a ballot, right? If there's any contention or anything like that. I think given the data that we now have driving behind, we could probably take what was done and refine and get it out. If we go, if we start like standing on tables for certain things and we can't come to a consensus as a group, maybe we put it out. And I think, yep, that's. Did we lose Steve? He became very.
Yeah, he had to drop.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Any other questions,
They-
comments, debates?
No, just thank Rock. Just this is a very challenging work to do, and also to keep us all in line. Much appreciate you taking charge and herding us all here. Just let's go.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Truly appreciate it. No, you guys make it easy. I don't have to keep anybody in line. And also, I think most of you know me well enough that I don't stay in line. So, I appreciate going off, right? I pushing the boundary. I don't see everybody on the screen. So if anybody's got a hand up, just no, I don't see any hands.
Quick question, just sort of building on some of the earlier discussion we had, and feel free to let me know if this is just the wrong form and we can discuss in Slack. Kind of going the tool schema exploitation. I was struggling to understand the distinctness between that and prompt injection. Like ultimately, the risk is tool schema having malicious context that LLMs can't distinguish between that and benign tools. Is that ultimately a form of prompt injection? I just wanted to raise that question. If we wanted to discuss it here, we can dig it deeper in Slack. But just wanted to bring that up in case. Yeah.
We have 10 minutes. Happy to discuss it here. I am not a red teamer. So I think it will come to maybe if it's a similar attack surface, like some of the red teamers on this call, Rachel and others. I don't know.
Yeah. So can you repeat to me the very first sentence? It's prompt injection and what was
the tool schema exploitation?
okay, because
my question is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is because tools are a vector in which prompt injection can be introduced to them. Are those essentially?
In essence, is tool schema exploitation really a subset of prompt injection in that it's a vector through which prompt injection?
I would say because there's other things about tool schemas that you can exploit in an application that has AI in it that isn't actually moving through the system the way prompt injection is, right? Like you're not trying to essentially pass instructions in a way that is being interpreted to the model. There's other ways that tool schema incorrect tool schemas could do things like open up a back door, provide a channel for unencrypted traffic. There's sort of other risks that could be realized by the tool schema vulnerability that isn't actually the way it's actually acting is trying to provide instructions to the model for the model to act on them differently. Does that make?
Yeah, and sorry, I misspoke. I meant the tool interface exploitation, but I think we're talking about the same thing.
Tool interface exploitation, right?
Yeah.
Because there's things within that tool interface exploitation that could have nothing to do with like trying to actually pass instructions to the model that then the model sort of interprets it as a way unintended for the way you want that application to behave. And that unintended like sort of model interpretation of instructions could affect tools downstream, right? You can it as a vulnerability it isn't necessarily the objective always to pass instructions to the model that you're hoping the model will interpret in a way that is against, is bypassing its safety guards or its like the application owner's expected behavior.
Yeah, it makes sense that there are risks that may not be injected into model content. The just capabilities the tool might then execute that would be outside of what the model is aware of. I guess my follow-up question there would be, is that kind of thing something that fits better in the agentic top 10 under the broad umbrella of tool misuse or agentic supply chain vulnerabilities? If what's unique is that is the parts that are not being sent, is that a better fit for the agent specific?
That's an interesting question, because the other things that I am describing about a tool interface that could introduce vulnerabilities, because essentially when you're doing a tool interface, unless you're hosting somehow locally, which is kind of a different thing, that tool interface is essentially providing a bridge between whoever that tool provider and your machine that it's connecting to in order to interact with your application, your AI app. A lot of that is sort of, you could, that could be unencrypted, that could have a deprecated encryption, that could try to pass commands direct to the end point versus you're saying like the
Yeah, because then when we start talking about things like unencrypted tool interfaces, is that, and I'm just trying to refresh my memory on the exact wording of the agent top 10, but is that something more along the lines of then insecure inter-agent communication or
right
even supply chain vulnerability?
Yeah.
Or O2 is literally tool misuse and
tool misuse and
I guess I'll have to look. I guess we should look at the entry to see how it different.
Yeah, I was going to say, does the tool misuse, does the way the tool misuse entry is written, does it imply always that misuse vulnerability is aimed providing the model instructions to make it behave in a way that's not intended by the application owner, related to other vulnerabilities in the way that you would do the integration of that tool into your app? Because subtract AI for a second. If you integrate any tool into your app, you can do that in a really bad way that causes vulnerabilities. You know what I'm saying? So prompt injection sort of covers the different vectors, the different attack surfaces that could deliver a type of instruction or a type of data that the model interprets as instruction. That's the best. Different attack surfaces where the model can get data and interprets as instructions, which causes the model to behave in ways other than what was intended by the person who developed that application. That's really what it covers. Attack surfaces, delivering data, model, and confuses that as instructions and not data it's supposed to analyze, data it's supposed to actions and so on. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Rachel. Finish your thought, please.
Well, I was just saying, if tool misuse or this tool attack surface, this other entry is scoped to just that narrow type of realized, then it is probably just an overlap with what we have in prompt. But if what that entry is saying is broad enough that it's addressing the other things, and again, if you're integrating another tool or system outside of your own to your application, you can do that in a way, right? API key exposure because you're being lazy and things like that. There's all sorts of ways that could be a vulnerability that have actually nothing to do with the model.
Yeah, and so looking at I was going to say, looking at, exactly. Part of what inspired my question was the first sentence in that was,
oh yeah,
is the model's inability to distinguish genuine tool schema from forwards run, which is of course a very serious. It's all, you could rephrase it to say model's inability to distinguish valid context versus not valid context, and now that's
except that prompt injection is very specific instructions to the model. The instructions are supposed to right. It's not just context or not, because this is very specifically saying the schema from a forged schema model. That's like the model thinking an object has a different schema, not that it's been data that it thinks is its core instruction. Because when we say prompt, we really mean that's the instruction that we're giving to the model. In my mind, this doesn't change the instruction the model has. It's changing what it thinks it's acting that instruction out on, which can cause all sorts of unintended behavior. But I don't think that, in my mind, this isn't actually changing the way the model is being instructed. It's a little bit difficult though, because what are you saying when you tell the model this is the schema? Is that an instruction? I could see how you could.
Yeah, that pretty much is going to be my next question is a tool description and a tool schema. It's instructing a model output in this. In a way, it's part of a model instruction.
Yeah.
Happy to be challenged on that.
Sounds like more conversation.
Yeah, I think I actually made a comment about this. I don't remember if it was in GitHub or in the survey where I said, you know, I think this might need some tweaking because it does seem to be some with the way we just prompt injection. Because of MCP's base specification, no mechanism to assign definitions, buying into or verify it. Yeah, let me chew on this a little bit, and then I'll go into chat. I want to do a little bit of research on this. I want to do a little bit of research. I'm hoping there's some incidents here that is really specific tool schema. Is there any down here that we can get?
The text.
Yeah, let me do a bit of research into this, and then I'll jump in because I want to understand the places that red teamers or threat actors may have actually done this and what the model's behavior actually, right? Like what the actual impact is. And then we can chat on it further. Thank you for pointing this out, though. That's a thinker. That's it's kind of an interesting angle to think about the way the two entries updates made collide.
And remember, this is a candidate, right? So it's like, is it a standalone candidate? Do we ignore it? I don't know if we ignore him because it could easily go. I think maybe a couple, but
I'll quick add. I thought the strongest part of this entry, I had some of the same questions. I thought the strongest part was the mitigations, but I don't know if those mitigations also overlap with even like supply chain, right? Cryptographically identifying something you're getting from.
Kristen, now that you say that, and I'm looking at the mitigations, that kind of goes to the earlier point that was made. Because of these, when I look at these mitigations, I go, this feels like more of these are very agentic specific mitigations. And maybe to the earlier point, maybe this is something that we might sort of toss over to the agentic team and say, we think there's some value in it, but it doesn't seem to quite fit into what
it calls out. It's like, hey, like it could touch all these three agentic. Maybe there's some stuff that we just, like, we don't have to take it whole hog, but if there's stuff that we haven't considered, right, and sprinkle it throughout, maybe some.
Yeah, to Kristen's, the mitigations are probably the juiciest bit of this that I wouldn't want to lose, but it feels like something we could ask the agentic team. At least two of these I know is in securing agentic application. So it might be something that we try to cross-reference there.
Yeah, one of the is leading the securing agentic applications guide. So yeah. By the way, full disclosure, I think this was my entry. I am super stoked that we're having this. Awesome.
I'm happy to keep this discussion going in Slack. Appreciate it.
Yep. Take care. Bye.